on, and welcome back to your weekly Xbox podcast, XPass, where we round up all of the gaming and Xbox news for your listening or viewing pleasure right here on youtube.com/Helix Plays Games. And also, this show is available up there in the digital clouds on your podcast preference of choice. You join myself in the absence of our man of many pixels, Mr. Richie, once again hosting Chris alongside our chaotic neutral returning once again, Rob. Hello.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, thank you. I'm here to talk about some video games. The weather's nice, it's the weekend, and Richie's in New York now. So he's still not here for this week, but he is in the Big Apple. Going to bring me back some orange Fanta, just remind that there, Richie, if you're listening to the show after the fact. And he'll be back probably on regularly scheduled programming next week for those who've missed him out there, who've missed him. But we're here to talk about video games, Rob, and that's what we do here on XPass. Don't forget, everyone, before we get into it, like, subscribe, ring that bell so you kept in the loop with all the great content we do here, like this very show, like tomorrow's show, Talking to PS, where we round up all the PlayStation news, our monthly Lunar show, and all of our live streams, because I played some games this week as well, which we'll get into. But we do have a great show lined up, talking about all of the Xbox courtroom drama. The FTC are out in full force with their lawyers, who seemingly don't know that much, actually, about video games. And we're going to be talking about acquisitions, SEGA, IO Interactive, Square Enix potentially, and a bunch of new games that were announced at this past week's Annapurna showcase. But Rob, before we start all these shows, we have a tradition where we do get into what we've been playing. So it's been a whole other week. What have you been playing?
So, my kind of habits have really switched this week, and I don't know why in particular. So, for some reason, I found myself dragged back into Resident Evil 4, the Mercenaries mode. No idea why. Well, actually, I do, because I want to play Stray for some reason, because I saw it was getting taken off the PlayStation Plus deal. And I started downloading it. I had it was 10 minutes to download the game or something. So I was like, oh, what can I do for 10 minutes? Don't read a book. Don't do a bit of housework. No, I just jumped into the first game I saw I could play 10 minutes in, and that happened to be Resident Evil 4 Mercenaries.
Oh, nice.
Which then transformed into
12 hours later.
It was basically 3 hours of trying to maximise my high score with Hunk. So that was fun. So played a bit of that.
Did you get to Stray then?
I did.
Right.
Well, I played 10 minutes of Stray. So I've never played that game before, and really, really good, but I kind of regret sinking all the time into Mercenaries, chasing a big number basically, and not experiencing the joys of Stray. There is
Stray's in our news later on, but there is an achievement in Stray for completing the game in 2 hours. So just think of the 3 hours you put into Resident Evil. You could have, in theory, completed Stray, but that's speed run though. So I would recommend you definitely enjoy it. But it was one of my and Richie's favorite games for last year. So you're onto a good one.
Yeah, I just love the aesthetic, and it's a good game to play when my girlfriend's on the couch as well. It's it's a cat, you can make it meow, and it's just a very chilled out ambient game, I think. Quite
easy to convince an animal lover to just watch along when it's just chill. It is a cute little tabby cat as well. We thoroughly enjoyed Stray. Do you think you're more inclined to like it as a cat person or a dog person? Because I prefer dogs, and I thoroughly enjoy just playing as a cat for a change. I think it's one of those things in video games, it's not really been done before. We've played as animals in Tokyo Jungle and stuff, but I don't feel like we've ever had a game dedicated, especially as such a story-centric game, where you play as a cat, or a dog for that matter.
Yeah, there's something, they've done something very, very well, and I can't really put my finger on it, but it's the haptics of being a cat, the way it kind of perches in some areas, and the way you can kind of claw up the rugs and stuff like that. It's going to sound so strange, but you get the feel of the cat perfect. I don't really know how better to say that.
They get the arsehole nature of cats right, basically. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I remember early doors for Stray, the developers were talking about some of the early complaints or pushback was saying when you're climbing around, it's almost like the cat snaps to the bar or the block or the house that you're climbing up, or the ledge. And the response to that was basically well, cats do climb very precise. Like that's in their nature. You don't see cats falling off things that often. As funny as it can be when it happens in all the videos you watch online, it very rarely does happen. So it said it would have messed with the game, and because of the nature of the puzzles and traversal, you would have just been falling off things all the time, and it wouldn't have made for a fun experience. But the linear part of the game, and I think the mechanics and the detail that went to getting like those cat mannerisms right, I think goes a long way as to what makes the game great. So I'm looking forward to it.
And you also can't have the cat falling all the time when the central kind of spark of the entire story was the cat fell off something. Like, if the cat's falling and falling and falling, it's like...
He's like, what's wrong with his cat? Like, every 5 minutes it's slipping off a fence and it's falling in a hole and all that. Yeah, interesting. But we do have some stray talk, actually, as part of the show, so we will get into that. Myself, I have... I said last week, I finished Planet of Lana on Game Pass. It's starting to win loads of accolades, actually, so check that one out. But this past week, I dove into... Arkham Knight, which is one of the things I was going to get to a little bit. So we don't do that much Luna content on the channel because there isn't much to do. But this coming Thursday, because I'm away in Liverpool with work, I thought I want something up to go on the channel because I think Richie's not quite back yet. I think you're usually occupied on a Thursday. So I thought I'll get something up. We haven't done it for quite some time. So I jumped in and played Arkham Knight on Amazon Luna, and I only played about an hour of it, but... that game's so good. I know it's like 8 years old at this point nearly, but it's so good, and it just makes me like...
feel it, though.
It really doesn't, and in the video I actually go in a little bit and talk about like why the art style holds up so well, because it is so stylized. It's aged like a fine wine, and I think it benefits it really, really well. So look out for that this coming Thursday, which is weird because I'm saying I've played a game that no one can see yet because it doesn't go up till Thursday. But that was one. And back on the Xbox side, I've been chipping away at Hi-Fi Rush still. So my main game is Final Fantasy 16. I'm chipping away at that, but I'll talk about that on Talking the PS tomorrow. In terms of Xbox, though, Hi-Fi Rush, it was one that I thoroughly enjoyed at the time, got distracted by other things, and it is my perfect mobile game. I'm playing it with the Razer Kishi on the go with my new phone, and I'm just doing a stage at a time because it is very much, even though it's kind of open world-esque, it is broken up into stages, and just the humour in the anime, and that's so good. I'm intent on finishing it. I think I'm about probably... halfway, maybe just beyond halfway, maybe coming up on 2/3 through. I've got 3 more boss fights to go. But Hi-Fi Rush, sleeper hit. I think it's definitely going to be in a lot of Game of the Year conversations. I don't think it'll win, but I think it'll be up there for maybe like winning some art style awards or like surprise hit or whatever that looks like.
That was a Game Pass drop as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's Tango Gameworks who did Ghostwire Tokyo, so it's an Xbox exclusive straight into Game Pass. And it was a stealth drop. I think they did it at the Indie Showcase ID at Xbox. It was at one of the events they did. It was just, here's an insight into some developers, and then boom, at the end, Hi-Fi Rush out now on Game Pass. Go claim it. And yeah, it had this massive boom, but then I think since then we've had so many big hitter titles have came out. It's been kind of caught up in the, whoa, it's not quite AAA, it looks a bit cartoony. But if that's your type of thing, anime, definitely check out Hi-Fi Rush. And we'll probably be talking about it for the rest of the year because it just got challenge mode announced at last week's Summer Games Fest. So we've got that too. Right, Rob, that's what I've been playing. Richie, what have you been playing?
Been playing Tourist, that's what he's been doing.
Been playing Tourist, yeah, he's been posting a lot of photos. Nintendo Switch, I'd imagine. Lots of Zelda on flights and in hotel rooms. But, as I said, he'll be back next week. Let's get into the thick of the show, Rob. If you could introduce us to the
excellently examined and excavated Xbox expose, a.k.a. The News. I think I caught out that time.
No, you had a week's heads-up notice. But our news is, of course, always brought to you by our wonderful Helix Heroes, the fantastic people who support us on the channel that little bit extra, just like you can, and you get our shows, content early, up to a few days early. We try and get up to you all stickers and badges next to your name in our live chats. But more importantly, you help the channel grow, and we'd appreciate anyone who can throw us that 99p or $1, less than $1, supports us, helps us invest in better tech and things for the future. So we do appreciate you all. Rob, news stories. As I mentioned, the thumbnail for this show is very much FTC heavy. The courtroom, it wrapped up. We don't have a definitive decision yet. Apparently there's a celebration called the 4th of July, Independence Day, where the aliens are going to come down next week and Jeff Goldblum's going to have to save us once again, happening next week. So the court kind of summary analysis has been pushed back. The judge, I think, will probably be working all the way through it, has to make a decision. I think the deadline at some point next week. So we don't know just yet, but the courtroom antics have wrapped up, and boy, do we have some tidbits in there to drill into. But before we get into all the FTC legal stuff, let's talk about some video games, because we're very well aware a lot of our shows now, almost week after week after week now, have been courtroom, lawyers.
Yeah, it's like an episode of Suits, isn't it? Basically.
It's turning into it, yeah. We're not dressed up in suits with our gavels. But, actually, thinking of that, lawyers, I'm sure there's a... like when people think of gavels in courtrooms and stuff, it's not actually a thing.
No.
It's like auctioneers have them, and then people, I think... I do think some court of law has them, but I don't think it's as worldwide as people associate. I think especially in modern, I think they just shout order, right? They don't actually hit a gavel.
They barely do that, to be honest. Most of the time, it's just like calm yourself or
a
lot more kind of
stand down.
Like order is very much like House of the Parliament type of.
Yeah, indeed. But we're definitely not going to get into that. Let's talk about some games. We had the Annapurna Interactive Showcase this past week, and we got a lot of titles, thankfully, confirmed for Xbox and Game Pass Day 1 release. So a couple of titles we'll get into. I don't want to go into them individually. I'll just shout them out one by one, and then we'll break down and pick our favourites out. We got confirmation that Cocoon, Thirsty Suitors, Flock, Bounty Star, Ghost Spike, and 2AT are confirmed for Game Pass, in and among some other titles as well. I did mention Stray was confirmed, so that cat game. They did a fantastic reveal with that one where the cat sits there pushing the Xbox controller off the table, and the little robot man's like, oh, don't do it, and the cat stares him dead in the eye and goes, F you. Slapped off the table. Nice little introduction there. Not coming to Game Pass, weirdly enough. I thought Stray was a shoo-in for Game Pass because it went into PlayStation Plus, but evidently it's obviously done that well for itself. It was in some of the Game of the Year conversation. The developers maybe think we don't have to bow to the Game Pass beast on this one. We might actually just try and get some incremental cash up front.
It's a fair decision, right? It's like, we have this like really, really big hit game, and there has to be like some kind of give and take with streaming platforms on that one, I think. So I think the developers are probably the right thing for their kind of house, but it is a bit disappointing.
Yeah, in a legal sense though, for all we know, PlayStation might have like a stipulation in their contract for PlayStation Plus that means after it's been on PS Plus, it can't go into Game Pass for like another period of time. So as much as I was expecting the end of the trailer to kind of go Game Pass, like we'd already had 6 other games at this showcase demonstrate, I thought, this one's a shoo-in. And it wasn't. So, surprise, surprise. I'm sure it probably won't retail at a crazy high price because it is a smaller game. Mm-hmm. It's had its due. It's been out for over a year now. So, my guess is it'll probably come in at the £25 to $30 mark. Maybe a little bit less if they're being generous. Yeah. Unless they want to try and rinse it for all it's worth. But yeah, not Game Pass, unfortunately. But Stray is one of the big ones. Out of those other titles that are listed there then, Cocoon, Thirsty Suitors, Flock, Bounty Star, Ghost Spike, and 2AT. Is there anything else that caught your eye from the showcase?
So, I'm not like huge on this, like on the kind of like indie platformer kind of niche that a lot of these games kind of fall into. Mm-hmm. But Cocoon looks kind of like really interesting. I like the art style on it. It from what I've seen, it feels like quite fluid and intuitive when you're looking at the gameplay on it. So yeah, that looks pretty good for me. But I feel like there's a lot of it's great there's such like a rich and kind of active indie community now where when we were younger there really wasn't, I don't think.
No, it didn't exist.
Yeah, and it's much more visible, but I do feel like there's a lot of volume getting added to Game Pass on these titles, perhaps unfairly, but that's kind of my take on it, I guess. Yeah,
Cocoon looks like a really fun, like explorative. It's from one of the creators of Inside Limbo, so you've got that kind of puzzle mechanics are going to come into it, along with obviously a visually stunning art style. With these type of games going on Game Pass, I feel like because it's a smaller title, having it on Game Pass actually for this particular size of title does give it a bit more gravitas than it maybe would have traditionally got. I think sometimes for other games it can go the other way, where it just becomes, it's just a Game Pass game, it's just a Game Pass game, where I think some of the indie ones, it really raises them a little bit, it raises their profile, and I think it puts them at the forefront for people checking them out who maybe otherwise would have looked at it and went, I'll pass. Right? Yeah, I mean, I've just said earlier in the show, like Planet of Lana, I would have probably looked at, thought that game looks really cool, I like the art style, but when it would have been, £15 to £20 to buy outright, I would have probably overlooked it and collected it in a year or so's time on another subscription platform possibly. But instead, I played it at launch, thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's now in my Indie Game of the Year discussion, and I've finished it. So, again, Game Pass could do a lot for developers. So then if you think 2-3 years down the line when they bring out the second game and they go from the creators of Planet of Lana, I've now got that foundation of, you know what, I like these devs, I love Planet of Lana, I might buy the next game. So there's like a longevity element to Game Pass, I think, which goes a long way. Cocoon, though, yeah, I think that's coming September 29th, so not too long to wait in the grander scheme of things once the summer's over. I quite like the look of Thirsty Suitors from Annapurna as well. So this one was showcased, I think it was at the Game Awards, we may have seen it. But this is essentially Scott Pilgrim. So it's the young girl who can skateboard around like a smaller open world, and you interact with characters. It's basically all of her not evil exes, but she fights her 8 exes. And she has problems with dealing like with her evil stepmom, I think it is, who just judges her all the time. And it's very much like a coming-of-age story, like Scott Pilgrim is, but with some fun fighting mechanics of all these like crazy, exaggerated anime exes, boys, girls, etc. And you got to fight them. At one point, there's a guy who's got a cat in like a baby carrier on his front. And that's, I don't know what his special is going to look like, but yeah, there's a couple of eccentric characters, and there's a couple of multiple choice conversation options, so you can fight people, you can flirt with them, you get overwhelmed by like their gorgeous abs and stuff like that. So there's a very good like comedy tinge to this game, and yeah, it's just something that very standout, very different, interesting. And the Scott Pilgrim movie is a lot of the humor does come from those like evil exes, and I think because it's got that element to the game, it does look super fun. Your thoughts on Thirsty Suitors, just off that description?
I like to do something different. That's the key thing. Like, I think maybe the style is a bit too strong for me in some regards. But like the great thing about indie titles is they don't have to have like this big mass appeal, which can make games kind of like bigger games kind of boring, kind of safe. Like, you know, like kind of how every game feels a bit like Uncharted now.
Yeah.
Like, indie games don't have to do that because their audience is kind of much more niche and much more small, so they can afford to take those risks, I think. And that's as much as I kind of, you see a lot of indie titles come out which are kind of clones of each other. It does allow for those kind of smaller, more stylistic ones to kind of shine.
Yeah, they can absolutely be what they want to be in theory. The other one that really caught my eye, just because it was so funny, was there's a game called To a T, and it had like. It had like it doesn't make any sense basically. You play as a boy and he's got a pet dog, and I don't really understand the premise of the game, but what I did get is they had a really good song that played over, like a comedy song, but the whole time the premise is the kid, he's in like the T-pose position, like, you know, video games, like when the NPCs glitch out, they're in the T-pose, and he spends his whole life in this T-pose position, so he's got to basically live his normal childhood, and throughout the song he just keeps saying like, I'm in a T-pose, like I'm stuck in literally there's just this inside gamer baseball humor that the whole game this kid's just running around with his arms out wide.
Do you think the developer was like, had to fix a bug, and like it was like for some reason he just couldn't figure it out, and he was like, oh, you know, screw this, the game's about T-posing now? Just...
Quite possibly, yeah. There's bits in the song where the kid's like, I don't know how I got to be this shape, and then he can also spin around and fly like Mario does, like whirlwind style. But yeah, there's no real insight into what the game is yet, but the comedy beats of it just hit really home. It's called To a T. What does really bug me about the name, though, is the 2A are all lowercase, and then it's a capital T, because obviously it wouldn't make sense lowercase. And there's something just how that reads to me, I don't like it. I'm a big fan of things being like capitalized correctly, but looks really good, quite interesting. And I think just looking at some of the other titles that were mentioned in here, To a T, Ghost Spike was an interesting one. Doesn't really explain too much what it is. Puts players in the shoes of a streetwise kid, ride the ghost bike to the afterlife and save lost souls. So it seems like it could be quite cool, but the game just looked like a bike game. Wasn't really sure much off of that. Yeah, the art style was quite nice. But Annapurna, good showcase. And of course, I think the biggest thing they've done recently was the Stray game that came out massively. They're a publisher. They did announce that they are going to be doing a Blade Runner game. which was probably the biggest announcement. This is the first game they've done in-house, so even though they've traditionally been publishers, Blade Runner was essentially their first dive into making a proper game. And Blade Runner 2033 Labyrinth. We don't know much about it. Mm-hmm. Where are you with the Blade Runner franchise? Have you seen them, watched them, enjoy them?
I love the original. I purposely didn't watch... is it 2049? Was it?
The one with Ryan Gosling is what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Like, I purposely didn't watch that because it had Jared Leto in.
Right.
And I hate Jared Leto.
You're not a big Morbius fan?
Oh, yeah. Those legions of Morbius fans, all of which you saw the movie and didn't just repost the memes. No, I love the original and I love the universe and stuff like that, but it hasn't been a franchise I've kept up with since it kind of got, I guess, like soft rebooted or whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
it's same for me. I remember watching my dad making me watch like the director's cut back in the day. And
it completely changes the tone of the movie, apparently.
It's really interesting. Obviously, I don't know anything other than that. But in terms of your Blade Runner, obviously, it's kind of, I guess, feeling off that cyberpunk vibe, where it was cyberpunk before cyberpunk. But then because of the kind of hype cyberpunk has brought, I guess it makes sense to do something with this IP now. It's had a movie revival, whether it did numbers or not. In the video game world, we've not had that. So the only thing that stands out for me, 2033, that's just 10 years away. I don't expect our world to be anything like... I know it's obviously based off the movie from the 80s, and that was obviously a dystopian future that we haven't quite got to yet. But yeah, we've got 2077 for Cyberpunk in 2033. So when we're sat here doing this show in our 40s, Rob, I don't think the world's going to be quite Blade Runner-esque by then. But
yeah, like I feel like the 80s movies like dramatically overestimated like the progression of society, really. Like fair enough, we have like iPods and iPads and stuff, like some stuff they got kind of right, but other stuff they got wrong.
We've also regressed in a lot of ways. I saw an advertisement, I kid you not, on Facebook the day for slippers or a hamster, like little tiny plastic slippers for a hamster, and to be fair, they were only 99p, so whether that's good or bad, or that's a fair marketplace, who knows?
I mean, a hamster itself only costs about like what, $5 or something?
Yeah, they're not that much. Yeah, absolutely not. But we digress. So moving on from the Annapurna news, let's get into some actual legal news. Let's put our wigs on and slam our gavels down as we dive into the FTC court case. Of course, for those who haven't been keeping up with this, Xbox are trying to buy Activision Blizzard King in a merger costing $68-something billion. And it's come under a lot of scrutiny from multiple regulators across the globe. We have the CMA in the UK have rejected it so far, the FTC in the United States. A lot of them have got on board with it. A lot of them haven't even been bothered. There was a funny note this week where one of the Canadian regulators said they'll be watching this court case with close eyes, to which an Xbox lawyer actually pointed out that Canada's missed their cut-off point to fight back against this. So their actual, they usually like go open public, and there's like a certain period of time for people to question it or raise concerns or raise legal cases. Yeah, it was a Canadian, one of the representatives said, we'll be monitoring the US case to see if it has an impact on the Canada one, and we might look into it then. And Xbox were like, you missed your date, dude. That was like, we put that out to Canada a few months back, and you missed your cut-off point, so you can't scrutinise this or regulate because you missed your window of opportunity. So aside from that, let's dig into the court case for this week. There's a couple of interesting things that have came out. To start with, I guess the biggest one to kickstart off is we found some email exchanges between Jim Ryan and Phil Spencer, which, of course, for those who don't know, Phil Spencer's head of Xbox, Jim Ryan's head of PlayStation, basically the two head honchos, having just email conversations back and forth. And I'm going to read from one of the main emails now. This is from Phil to Jim regarding Activision merger. As I stated to you in my emails and on our call, Sony is an important distributor of Activision content, and we would like to find a way to maintain that relationship once we've closed the Activision acquisition. I continue to stand by the written agreement I sent to you in January with my signature memorializing our commitment to Sony. The agreement will keep all existing Activision console titles on Sony, including future versions of Call of Duty and other Activision franchises, through December 31st, 2027. That includes content and feature parity, as well as making it clear we would not feature any time exclusives of such content on Xbox console. It's hard to align the principles set out in your email on May 26th, with Sony leading the role in the market. As I said before, we believe in keeping these titles on Sony, as we did with Minecraft, and it's the right thing for the industry and the gamers. So Phil sending a very open letter there regarding Call of Duty and the merger, and basically saying, like, look, we've offered you something, that's what we want to do. And Jim Ryan's response, which doesn't seem as kind of casually written by Phil, it goes well into basically saying there's fundamental principles. I'm not going to read Jim's because it's literally 10 paragraphs
long, right?
Yeah, and he essentially just basically says no. It's Jim Ryan basically playing the typical fly in the ointment as such, and just basically it's lots of legal speak, lots of terminology, lots of I hereby second that principle in the proposal, and a lot of legal basically I don't think Jim Ryan wrote this email. I think he paraphrased it, and the lawyers basically corrected this and tweaked it. But all in all, it's interesting to see that they just have behind the scenes just a casual back and forth, which you always just expect it to be all done in like courtrooms with lawyers and stuff, but actually these two just casually emailing each other going, look Jim, what Phil, we're trying to get these deals done, and there's a lot of stuff came out of the court case this week that Jim Ryan doesn't actually believe that Call of Duty would be that detrimental to PlayStation. There was some internal emails between Sony where they actually referred to PlayStation as their baby, which was kind of like endearing inside, like our baby will be fine. Jim Ryan sent to one of his other colleagues saying PlayStation will be safe in the future regardless of what the deal does. But the big thing that came out in court is Jim basically saying he doesn't think he's not got a problem with Call of Duty Activision merger. He doesn't have a problem with mergers and Activisions, which is, I guess he has to say, because Sony have also gone out recently and acquired multiple things, and they probably have their eyes on things in the future. And my overall kind of take on this case is Jim Ryan doesn't want to necessarily stop this. He wants to delay it so PlayStation have enough time in the bank to make basically something to combat Call of Duty. It's all about, I think, stall tactics.
Yeah, I agree.
If he can get Phil Spencer to come out and say, we have a commitment to getting Call of Duty on PlayStation, even beyond the 10 years. If they can get Phil Spencer verbalising that, which he has done in court, again, swearing on oath, he's got his hand on the Bible and in the air, and he swore on oath and said he will bring Call of Duty to PlayStation titles as long as he can. So that's on record now. So as long as he's the head of Xbox, that will come back and bite him on the ass if Call of Duty is never not on PlayStation. In regards to, I think, Jim's side, he's just thinking, if I can delay this by a year, 2 years, or maybe keep it off GamePass for 5-6 years, that will mean Call of Duty is going to be on PlayStation anyway, so Sony get their cut. But more importantly, he's got an extra, basically a whole development cycle of a video game to get a shooter out that can potentially eat some of that Call of Duty pie. So what's your take on all this so far, Rob? Obviously it's getting very long in the tooth, but...
Yeah, I mean, it echoes yours quite similar, to be honest. We've seen in the past kind of year or so how hamstrung Microsoft have been to this entire debacle.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably fair to say that the game library has suffered because of so much internal resource and so much internal focus on this deal, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you're Sony and you're like, yeah, we'll just stretch this out as long as possible because what we're doing is working. If we can keep this kind of party going for another couple of years, then that kind of secures my position for a good while. And speaking practically as well, how long does a typical CEO stay in a position for? By the time this actually becomes a problem for Sony, there's a good chance that Jim Ryan's just gone somewhere else at that
quite
point.
Possibly.
So yeah, I can't see him being kind of fundamentally against it because, as you say, he lives in a big giant glass house.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to acquisitions of studios and stuff like that, so he doesn't want to throw too big a stone.
Because they all share trade. As much as the FTC lawyers are trying to make out that Nintendo Switch doesn't compete directly with these two, still to this day, it is an emphasis on what Jim's role is. And I think Jim, since he's took over at PlayStation from Jack Tretton, he's not really been the face of PlayStation. He's been just more that old disgruntled guy who clearly doesn't actually play games. He is a businessman first and foremost, and his job is to protect the business and its assets. And him being an asshole and trying to push back and fighting against this and He didn't even go to court. He just sent a video disposition in. So it's like a case of he's like, but he was at Kojima Studios to take a selfie with Hideo Kojima. So he's got the time to fly around the world and pose for photos, but not show up in court for a legal case. So it's you can kind of see where his merits lie. But at the same time, he knows what he's doing and he's protecting his business. And as much as we can like be a favorite of like one brand or the other, he's doing it the same, and I'd hope to think anyone defends their own business with similar like ruthlessness. Essentially, like he's not there to be people's friends. He's not there to be liked by gamers. He's there to protect Sony's assets. And at the end of the day, Call of Duty is a very important asset for PlayStation. And if they lose it, whether it's now or in 10 years' time, if they lose it, there's no going back from that. So it's a weird one. The court case, as it unravelled, we did get some more points. Is the importance of Call of Duty was brought up quite a lot of the time, with pretty much the lawyers and the FTC specifically honing in on Call of Duty is the be-all, end-all. And some of the lawyers came out and tried to compare. I think Xbox at one point compared to the Elder Scrolls, and it was like, in terms of like, there is nothing like Call of Duty, and it was described in the courtroom as like a unicorn of video games, because you can make another shooter, yes. You can have all the exact same mechanics, but there is something about Call of Duty, whether it's a combination of the branding, the marketing, its relevance, its history.
Yeah, it's pedigree, isn't it?
It's just a juggernaut that seemingly just not relent. And just because you match that one for one with everything that I've just said, that doesn't guarantee you that it's going to work, and it's not going to match the scale of Call of Duty. So it is a bit of a unicorn. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto in a way as well. Like there's many other games that have just open world, do a bit of everything, and yet GTA is the one that's like one of the best-selling games of all time that doesn't stop. So
yeah, like the amount of clones that come out of these like big titles and just fall by the wayside in like 6 months is uncountable, to be honest. And like we don't talk about them because there's no point, because they're so frequent in this.
Absolutely.
Like that,
but Call of Duty does seem to be the focus point. There was a lot of chatter this week about the mobile division being a bit important part. We covered it on last week's show about Zynga was up for purchase, and they kind of had deep in discussion with it and ended up backing out. And I think King and Xbox getting into this was their biggest focus. Some of the biggest parts that did come out this week, kind of moving the story along a bit, was at one point Xbox was looking to acquire Square Enix. So as far back as 2019, internal documents and reading from them, Square Enix owns a diverse suite of gaming franchises that could serve as a cornerstone of our strategy, helping us extend our offerings beyond console and our current markets. An acquisition of Square Enix would provide valuable content assets that would accelerate the growth of Xbox Game Pass and drive success for Project Scarlet, which at the time we didn't know to be the Xbox Series X. And this comes out of legal documents revealed as part of the hearing. And again, we knew from last week they were looking at acquiring a couple of people, but I've been saying for quite some time, as Richie's, I think we've all agreed, that Square Enix have been like streamlining. They got rid of Tomb Raider, they got rid of Square, Adios Montreal and stuff, sold them to Embrace Group for some ridiculously low fee. It was like 500 million, I think. And is it no surprise that Xbox were looking? They've always struggled in Japan. We could be in a world similar to what we discussed last week about they acquired ZeniMax to basically stop Sony having Starfield. That was why we had Ghostwire Tokyo, we had Deathloop, and they did that to put a stop to it. Are we in a similar world here, Rob, where they just see Sony constantly getting deals like Forspoken, Final Fantasy, and they just sat there thinking, we can't even help it. What if we just buy Square Enix and we own it? And then it becomes an exclusive.
Because one, it strengthens their library, and B, weakens Sony, right? Like, you have to think that would have been a consideration. And I'd have been amazed if it wasn't, actually.
I mean, if you think about even just the conversation this very week, Final Fantasy 16 is doing huge numbers as a PlayStation exclusive. This could have been Xbox exclusive and on Game Pass. And for whatever rhyme or reason, people will have moved allegiances to play this, because there's a lot of Final Fantasy fans who they just want to play the game. So this is where exclusives come in.
A lot of Final Fantasy fans like predate Xbox entirely.
And PlayStation to a degree.
Yeah, and they may have actually went over to Xbox during like the run of the series and stuff like that, but they still have this like root in the Final Fantasy universe, which eventually after Scratcher has to get itched, right? So
yeah, it's one of those like living your best moral life. As much as you try, you will still on your day-to-day basis do things that impact the environment and have a knock-on effect that you don't want to do.
Buy stuff from Amazon, because even though you know they're not the best company to buy stuff from, like, you just do it. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. You'll do that thing. So it's hard to do. So yeah, if you're a fan of that game, like if I didn't have an Xbox, I would have wanted to play Indiana Jones because I'm a big Indiana Jones fan. I'm going to see the movie this weekend. However, if that came out as an Xbox exclusive and I didn't have a console, I would have that dilemma where I'm like, I want to play it. And at what point does that dam break? And for a lot of people, it might be Call of Duty. It might be Crash Bandicoot. It might be Spyro. It might be Diablo. Diablo is another game that's doing wonderful numbers right now. It's so popular. That could have been an Xbox exclusive if this deal had gone through. So it's an interesting one for the case. But yeah, so Square Enix was one of the people that they looked at. Another article that came out this week from the FTC was there was something to do with other acquisitions, and another one was IO Interactive. So those who might know them from the Hitman franchise, they're currently working on a James Bond title known as Project 007, and they have previously confirmed, I think it was last week, there's Project Dragon, which is going to be a RPG shooter from IO Interactive that is going to be an Xbox exclusive. So from this, we've learned two things. Is one, Xbox were looking to acquire IO, and then secondly, they're working on an exclusive. So I guess the news out of this, Rob, is we're getting an RPG shooter from a team that's famous for just doing stealth games like Hitman. And yeah, this was another one lined up for acquisition. So looking at the documents, we don't quite have a blurb to read from it, but they showed company overviews and basically compared how they've been received metacritically. This is internal documents showing that Hitman 3 all the way down have done fairly well, usually in the high 80s in terms of percentages. Their community involvement, their projects, their stakes in the company, their duration, their history, their legacy, founded in 1998. It is basically Microsoft once again looking at it going, are these good for the picking? Like, who do we... Like, I wonder, like, at what point when they were looking at all these, they just sat in a room and went, where do we throw our money around? And at some point, they settled on Activision Blizzard. Even though, again, back to the Square point, Embracer picked up Adios Montreal and Crystal Dynamics and the Tomb Raider IP, along with some other ones like Deus Ex, for $500 million. And yet, Xbox have sat in their room and went, Call of Duty, Activision, $68 billion.
I think it comes back to that point where we're talking about unicorn titles. Like, I feel like Xbox does decently well in that kind of, you know, the Ubisoft territory, for lack of a kind of word. But they don't have those, like, franchise breakers. They don't have, like, that upper quality, like the Uncharted series or like the Call of Duty kind of exclusivity and stuff like that. Like, they haven't had those titles for a very long time, and fair enough, Starfield could be the one that kind of breaks that kind of pattern, so to speak. But I think they just saw like the quality of stuff they could get from like ABK and just thought, yeah, let's just go all in instead of like bloating out this like it's not even fair to call these games second tier, like that kind of like less than stellar, so to speak. But I think they've just went, no, let's like kind of break new ceilings and try and get these,
reach for the top shelf is what they've done. Yeah. And again, very few companies on this planet have that capital cash sat lying around to do this kind of thing. In regards to like mergers and acquisitions and the reference and the money being spent, a great point that I think it was in one of the emails between Jim Ryan and his colleagues was pointing out was that Xbox, as much as the exclusivity and people are focusing on, Call of Duty is going to be an Xbox exclusive, it behooves them to do that because of the cash price. So we know, yes, it might be on Game Pass eventually, but if you want it on PlayStation, you can still get it. It'll just cost you £70, $80, whatever it may be. So there's that money, and Microsoft in their documents have highlighted how it would be detrimental financially for them to take Call of Duty off PlayStation. On the flip side, Jim Ryan in his conversation was saying that if they were going to spend $68 billion to get this to buy these studios, they could have spent a tenth of that to just lock Call of Duty down as exclusive. So this is where, if you think you could take all of them billions of dollars, go to Activision and go, you know what, we'll front all the cost of the game. We want it exclusive for like a year or 2 years or 3 years, and it wouldn't even be a drop in the ocean to what they're spending to acquire them. I think this goes back to, I don't think Xbox have any interest in taking Call of Duty away from PlayStation, because one of the financial benefits, and two, the amount of sheer money they're willing to spend to buy them, they could have took even just a small sliver of that and locked Call of Duty down for Xbox exclusive for years to come anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me think like this isn't their end goal. Their end goal is the studios and their IP long term to grow this business beyond just Xbox and create that ecosystem that Phil Spencer kept talking about, where they want to make money from any avenue. Doesn't matter who it's through, it's their console or someone else. They just want money as a business coming in.
It goes back to what Phil, I think we briefly touched on it last week, where he was trying to explain to
the lawyer,
three-letter alphabet agency or whatever, I can't remember now. He was saying like he's not Microsoft aren't spending that money on like nothing. They're transforming the money they have into an asset, which they think they can make into a bigger asset. Like you don't make a bigger asset by like fucking off half your market. Like
you don't acquire something to shrink it.
Yeah, by effectively half or more actually. Yeah. Well, what's the Xbox share now? Like 25%, did it say, or something like that?
Oh yeah, like, it's they're in third place, confirmed.
Yeah,
so
like, you don't buy an asset and then immediately like just essentially dehydrate the fruit to like a little shrivel, and then it's just weird.
That's not business.
Yeah, so it completely makes sense. And to his credit, like I think probably Jim from Sony's a bit kind of like maybe a bit too casual about it. By the sounds of the emails.
Like, it doesn't matter because they wouldn't. But he almost like answers his own problem. Like he's trying to fight Call of Duty going on there, but at the same time, it's like, look, if they wanted it, they could have afforded it 10 times over. But that's not where they're putting their money. So it's again, this is where I think Jim's tactics. He's not there to stop it. He's just there to delay it.
Yeah,
because he wins.
Problem.
He wins.
I'll just extend it,
back to acquisitions, though, another tidbit that came from the news was they also looked at acquiring SEGA. So, again, reading from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and CFO Amy Hood talking about their interest in acquiring SEGA. So this is reading from their email. I'm writing to request strategy approval to approach Sega Sammy Limited regarding a potential acquisition of their Sega gaming studios. We believe that Sega has built a well-balanced portfolio of games across segments with global geographic appeal that will help us accelerate Xbox Game Pass both on and off console. So again, these emails kind of like, they're very copy and paste, repeating themselves, but essentially over at Xbox HQ over the last few years, and I'm sure the same things happened at PlayStation, to be fair. I think there's probably only Nintendo who aren't in this game right now, looking around and going, right, we've got a pot of money. How do we expand our portfolio? How do we improve the content on Game Pass? And they're kind of right. Like, looking at all of these studios so far, Bungie, Square Enix, Sega, they all come with their own library of legacy games and studios, more importantly, studios to develop content so that Game Pass is having that content drop the likes of Netflix and Disney strive for, where every month you give your users a reason to resubscribe or stay subscribed. All you need to do is just enough new content so people go, you know what, I might as well just keep it. And whether you're interested or not, you just need that right marketing beat, that something on the horizon that makes people go, yeah. And that could be Sonic Superstars that's coming out later this year. It could be something really simple. It could be a mega hit like Final Fantasy. Xbox have the first-party studios working on a game ideally for every quarter. And then between those quarters, you need those smaller titles to do that. And there's only so long, I'd imagine, Xbox want to spend that on second-party deals, third-party deals. At some point, they're going to want to lock these down. And they've already got 20-plus studios internally, but because of the way the games are made and the turnaround time, is it any surprise, Rob, that they wanted to look at Sega as well? Like the ironic thing for Sega is obviously they were in Xbox's position at one point in this industry, and now they're looking at being absorbed into the wider one.
I think Sega will be a really interesting one, because if you get Sega, then you get Creative Assembly, which kind of are behind the Total War series, which is massive on PC. And I would have really bolstered like the PC Game Pass product. So I think for that alone, that would have been a really good move.
The Football Manager is a big one. Again, it's things that you maybe don't associate with Sega, because everyone, like myself included, just thinks Sonic. It's just Sonic.
Yeah, you do.
But there's all of like the JRPGs that they do. There's a wealth of content, which again, applying that then to the Game Pass model, that, as you said, that spreads things out. PC, that means everyone who wants the Age of Empires hit potentially then has Total War every other year instead. So you've got that content drip that's been consistent. So obviously we don't really know where that goes. Sega actually came out this week and explicitly said like they are happy with their relationship with Xbox currently. They're not looking to be bought. So they've kind of doubled down on saying, we're not looking for a sale, because all jokes aside is no matter how much Microsoft talk internally, there's no guarantee that the buyer would have like got through with the deal.
Yeah,
Sega could have just went, oh no, get lost, like we're not interested. Square Enix could have said, no, we're holding out for Sony to buy us. The only kind of sad one, I think, in all this news, in all these acquisitions, is poor old Ubisoft haven't been mentioned. They're the one company probably dying to be purchased and snapped up just to save on their finances on all fronts. And it's not there, Rob. It's not there.
Yeah, so. It's like, guys, we're doing a Black Flag remake. Guys, please.
I mean, yeah, we should mention that. It's not actually in the news doc because I think it was announced, I think, late last night. And ironically enough, between all the news stories of Skull and Bones being delayed yet again, of course, Skull and Bones, the spiritual successor to Black Flag, there's leaks and rumors going around that Ubisoft are looking to looking to start up basically a Black Flag remake. And guess who's helping out? The team who were making Skull and Bones. Which it just baffles, doesn't it, Rob? It just baffles.
Yeah, I think it's like, guys, we won't help remaking this game, which the actual successor of that game we still haven't finished yet. Like, that must be a kick in the teeth for some really old developer now who's just been working on Skull and Bones for his entire career.
Is this Black Flag remake going to be out before Skull and Bones?
I think, who knows with Ubisoft? You just don't know what they're going to do, but I can see Skull and Bones being rolled into like the multiplayer element of a Black Flag remake, just to save it somehow.
If you buy Skull and Bones, Season Pass 3 comes with Black Flag remake, something like that, like tie it in. Because they've done that tradition, like if you bought Far Cry 6, you got Far Cry 3 remake free. So they've done that. They're not scared of doing that. It's just the big irony, isn't it? But that kind of goes back to Ubisoft wanting the Assassin's Creed Infinity model. They've remade pretty much everything upwards. We have the Ezio collection, and every other thing's got a remake, or it's modern and current enough to stand up to today's standards. Black Flag, I think, does still hold up quite well. It was a PS4 launch game. Yeah. And, I guess giving it a bit of polish would lend into Unity so that every Assassin's Creed game is accessible. The only thing with that is the outlier, I guess, is the original game still, which we're getting a Mirage, which kind of is, but isn't. Black Flag, one of my favourite games. I think everyone, again, it's not necessarily an Assassin's Creed game, it's just a great pirate game. And it is just a big shame that they never just made like Pirates Creed and it was its own spin-off, and by now we should have had 3 Pirates Creed games focusing on Edward Kenway.
It's like Black Flag 1, 2 and 3. Like, you don't need to call it Assassin's Creed anymore, do you?
There should be an alternate world where we've had those games by now, but alas, no, we're waiting on Skull and Bones and we're talking, but it's still just rumoured, but fill those boots. I'm sure Ubisoft are doing everything they possibly can do to bump the share prices up, and I guess a big part of that is hopefully be bought. I do think Ubisoft are ripe for the acquisition. Like, they've done enough to shoot themselves in the foot the last 5-6 years, and yet they still have that, back to what we're saying about Microsoft, that wealth, that portfolio, that if Microsoft snapped them up, getting a Far Cry on Game Pass every other year, getting an Assassin's Creed, getting a Crew, that fills your gap in your portfolio so well, and it's actually surprising Xbox have looked at everyone but them, seemingly.
I think that's right. Like, take the IPs, take the kind of the pedigree, and then whoever acquires them, like, apply a sensible way to make games and manage them themselves internally, which I think is the way to fall down. It's not necessarily the quality of the devs and everything. It's all like the management decisions. So apply some sense to that from a more successful and more streamlined company, and Ubisoft can be doing gangbusters very soon.
Well, that's one of the things I think puts people off Ubisoft, is because they are such a huge company. They have like 10,000 plus heads in their business, which is more than most of these companies have, like more than probably Microsoft have alone in their own internal ones. Acquiring a company of that scale brings with it like its own issues with, you've got to deal with like HR, pensions, like all of the actual the boring business side of it. They may be too big for their own good to be acquired because of not just the games and the products, but just the staff, the people, like the actual bit, like the property Ubisoft must own all around the globe, like in all these different countries, like the stuff that comes with like taxes and mortgage payments and whatever rent they may pay on these like 1,000+ properties, and all the overheads of staff and outgoings for probably like travel costs and expenses, and it's just almost like it's too much of a headache for Microsoft, so they're looking at someone maybe a couple of like echelons down just to acquire.
The reality is whoever buys them, I would foresee like quite dramatic downsizing from a Ubisoft thing. Because I do feel like they are quite bloated as a
let's face it, more acquisitions and there's a lot of people who do like similar jobs mirrored across the business. So if this Activision deal does go through, there is going to be someone who who works at Microsoft who is doing the same job someone is at Activision Blizzard King, and naturally they're going to go, well, why are we paying two people for the same role? Fuse them into one and you'll have redundancies and stuff. So that is the harsh reality of acquisitions too. But that's it for now. That's all we have on the acquisition front. We'll get into some of the other little pieces of news. We also talk about cloud gaming here on the channel, and another tidbit that came from this week's FTC stuff is that Microsoft sacrificed growing its Xbox Series X and S sales numbers to trade off with investment for cloud gaming. In an internal email between Phil Spencer and CFO Tim Stewart back in 2020, the pair discussed the reason behind the lower number of Xbox consoles going to market. The email has been revealed as part of the hearing and basically says that they'll have to cut back on their yield for Scarlet, which was the code name for the X and S consoles, and delay the Halo Infinite launch were the main factors of the console scarcity. So during the initial launch period, Microsoft essentially cut the units so they could get the silicon chips into the cloud servers instead, which basically says, like, we're not going to sell as many on market to the public, but at the same time, Halo isn't ready to go anywhere, so we're happy to take that hit. And we want to invest in cloud. So the trade-off was essentially cloud gaming content, which also I think Sarah Bond basically came out, I think we covered it last week, and said cloud gaming is a dedicated feature, and a lot of people are using it to demo games and trial games on Game Pass, which is albeit one of the best things that Xbox do, but it's not seen as a way to play games fully or experience Xbox to its entirety. So almost in a weird way, like doing their own cloud gaming service a disservice. Like Sarah Bond saying, it's a feature. And I think this is, because the UK, the CMA, the reason they put the kibosh on this was because of cloud gaming and that marketplace getting bigger. So I think in the months since the CMA, they've gone to court on this one, and they want to take all focus away from cloud gaming when it comes to the FTC. So when Sarah Bond goes to the stage and stands there and they go, well, what about cloud gaming? They go, it's just a feature. Don't worry about it. Like, don't listen to the CMA saying it's one of the reasons we should be worried about this acquisition. And I think they're playing it down a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. But from this email chain, it gives you a very clear sense on where Xbox see the future is. Like, obviously, we've seen the actions coming from, like, the investment in cloud gaming. But to actively say, like, no, this resource goes here. It doesn't go into arguably like the flagship console, like the thing that's got like going up square against the PlayStation 5. To be fair, losing against it. Like, let's be honest. It's really interesting to see these kind of internal emails, but
it's mad to think how just like not serious, but like their console sales, you think all focus would go on shipping the consoles, the box, but then this goes back to it's all about the ecosystem for Microsoft. Yeah, the consoles don't matter because they've got PC, they've got cloud, they've got Game Pass, and evidently, like, it hasn't had a material impact because PlayStation's outsold them anyway.
Yeah, the crazy thing is, I was thinking about this when like the story came out, and when's the last time you saw a Series X in the wild, like anywhere? Like,
I don't really go out into the wild now, so it's hard to actually picture one on a shelf. And my supermarkets don't have a gaming section. My town that I live in doesn't have a game shop.
Like, even when you're around somebody's house for like something, like, I just haven't seen an Xbox Series X in, I can't remember how long.
I think I only know 2 friends who've got one.
Yeah, like, when you actually think about how little you see an Xbox Series X thing.
Yeah. It's
like,
an
I see the S
interesting
everywhere, like loads of people have S's. But
yeah. Again, it's the world we live in, right? It's all about cost and value, and getting that Series S was enough for me and Richie and yourself, so who knows? Part of me does want an X, but then I'm like, what am I getting it for, other than just to have the best bit of tech? But evidently, if the game's on there, it doesn't matter. I can play them on PC regardless. Right, rounding out the show, Rob, a couple of final news stories. There was a little funny tidbit. Microsoft lawyers apparently want to catch up with Final Fantasy, and they skipped straight ahead to the Elder Scrolls 16. This was just a nice joke-away comment where the lawyers were going back and forth about the importance of games, and I think the comparison of big series, ongoing series, was coming to light, and the Elder Scrolls was discussed. And the funny takeaway from all this was basically that a Microsoft lawyer, of all people, came back and basically said, no, when we're talking about ZeniMax, this was asking an FTC lawyer, to find a game that was most similar on Xbox, he mentioned Elder Scrolls, which I don't see how that's a like-for-like comparison at all. And then the Microsoft lawyer stepped in and said, that's incorrect. There are 2 Elder Scrolls games. One is online, called Elder Scrolls Online. That is a multiplayer game, and it's on PlayStation today. The lawyer then went on to say that he's been referring to the Elder Scrolls 16, which is project planned to release as in 2026 as a single-player game. So, obviously, for those who are in the know, it's not Elder Scrolls 16 up next, it's Elder Scrolls 6. Todd Howard's confirmed that. We know that is a thing. Interesting, though. They're expecting 2026 to be the date, even though that seems quite soon because they've got Starfield to focus on right now, and I don't think that's going to be done up and wrapped anytime in the near future.
Absolutely not.
But it is just quite funny to think I'm sat here playing Final Fantasy 16, and then this lawyer's just like, they're that bad on some of the facts that they didn't even get that right.
I mean, Elder Scrolls 16 is not coming out in our lifetime, is it?
No, we'll be everyone will be long gone by the time Elder Scrolls 16 sees the light of day.
Like it's going to be the next generation will be in the 30s by the time it comes out.
Yeah, well, we joked about Jim Ryan won't be around. I mean, he may be around alive, but he might not be working at PlayStation by the time this 10-year Call of Duty deal ends. None of us will be around by the time Elder Scrolls 16 comes around. Maybe online will still be going. Maybe they'll keep supporting it. But crazy future. And speaking of the future as well, we've also had the news that dropped this week that Perfect Dark, which we knew about for some time, was announced back in 2020, is struggling, Rob. No surprise here. It's been worked on by The Initiative, the studio that was created to make, and again, quoting the job description from The Initiative, quadruple A video games for Xbox studios. We had a little teaser back in the day, Perfect Dark reboot. And they've been brought on with Crystal Dynamics. So previously at Square Enix. Now it's not with Square Enix, but they are still under Square Enix ownership for the sake of this deal, even though they're now owned by Embracer. So it's a whole weird back and forth on that one. But reporting from IGN, Rebecca Valentine has shed some light on the bumpy road and saying that the project's hit roadblock after roadblock, and it's making little meaningful progress in its years since its reveal. For the last 2 years, it struggled, and apparently there's an inability to communicate a clear vision, which has led to stuff being built up and then being thrown out, which is creating mounting frustration among staff. This is it's ongoing. It seems to have a lack of direction, and as someone who's never played the Perfect Dark series, I know it's much beloved. Often people say it's actually better than the GoldenEye series, but yeah, I don't know with this one. It seems odd that they've announced it so soon, and seemingly 2 years further on, we're nowhere near it being anywhere close to completion. So, is this just one that becomes vaporware?
It's like they'll have announced it, and then obviously a couple of development teams will be pulled off to go through a crunch on another project, and they'll delay it for 6 months, and then the director will leave, and then a new director will come in, not have the resource to enact his vision, so he'll start again, and it's just going to be this perpetual cycle until a team gets
that's it. Reading from the article as well, Perfect Dark's fortune seemingly looked to improve in 2021 when Tomb Raider developer Crystal Dynamics signed up to supplement and support the Initiative Studios. However, the vertical slice Crystal Dynamics was sent, which was basically the fruits of the project's first 3 years in development, was a bit of a mess, one source told IGN, and a lot of the project, if not almost all of it, ended up being wholly reworked. So in 2021, you bring in Crystal Dynamics, who, again, made fantastic Tomb Raider games. They know their shit. They know what they're doing. And then they look at it after 3 years and go, needs all redoing. This just isn't quite right. And then
you're not that good, lads, is it really?
You're pretty much back to the drawing board then. So as of 2020, work got underway. And again, quoting from it, the whole thing was started pretty much from scratch in Unreal 5 in 2020, last year. So, yeah. Again, this is supposed to be a spy-flavoured FPS combining espionage, gadgets, and combat. It's still in pre-production at roughly 2 or 3 years away from release, so don't expect to see this on Game Pass anytime soon.
Yeah, which is 28 maybe.
Which makes you just think, why did they tease it? Why? Obviously, you get that kick of marketing, and then everyone forgets. Just look at Ubisoft and Beyond Good and Evil 2. Like, just why?
I mean, the thing is, Microsoft will have had like a week period of like announcements to make, and just be like, "Oh, should we just tease this? That'll get people happy," and like not thinking of the actual consequences of not delivering on that.
We'll satiate them a little bit. But overall, though, Rob, it's been a crazy. Oh, what a bit! I feel like we've been talking about this for literally since the inception of this show. Is this ABK deal?
Yeah,
and it's an interesting one to look into a little bit. There's ups and downs, and there's going to be a lot to go through. But at the end of it all, now we'll finally have our decision next week. Where do you sit on this acquisition? Do we think it's going to go ahead, or Xbox are just going to throw in the towel after this? If they get pushed back by the FTC, that's their biggest market share. It's their home turf. I think it's dead in the water. I think they'll take their billions and go spend them elsewhere if this is the case.
It's make or break next week. I think it's going to be okay and go through. At which point, like the CMA will fold, obviously, because they just will.
Yeah, they're not going to be taken away from it because the CMA. Weirdly, we should say that even though we thought it was all over, the CMA's attempt to postpone Microsoft have basically a hearing date where they said we want to basically push back on the CMA's decision, and the CMA said, "Oh, we want to delay the hearing a little bit longer." And the competition's appeal tribunal in the UK basically said, no, a month is ample time to go through this content. You're not getting it delayed. So the CMA are trying to kind of like walk things back a little bit and get more time. That ain't happening. So it's interesting thing, like governing bodies have other governing bodies who then step in and say, like, all these people are probably on like wages well beyond ours, and you think, damn you do practically nothing, and yet somehow you're part of this. FTC decision.
Pushing papers.
An interesting one though with all this, Rob, is it's not a jury. It's just the judge. It's one individual who makes this decision. And seemingly from the questions, the judge has been quite interesting throughout the whole thing, where they've self-admittedly said they don't know much about video games. So then when the lawyers have been doing their kind of the closing arguments, is the judge has been quite not naive, what's the word I'm looking for, like curious about it. So she's asked like loads of relevant questions. She's pushed back a lot on some of the lawyers' inputs and their closing arguments. And I think if you didn't know much about the industry and you see the two cases like side by side for all they're worth, I don't think the FTC have given enough reason that Microsoft can't go ahead with this.
No, like I completely agree.
I see
like,
where
we also get wrapped up into it, don't we? Because we're gamers and stuff like that. But putting a general hat on it, it's I just don't see it being a thing that can break a deal like this.
And everything we've covered, like through a business lens, is big company, has money, wants to invest. FTC think it's bad for multitude of reasons that are pretty much flat in the water. Like, oh, it doesn't compete with Nintendo Switch. Oh, it'll break competition. But then Xbox on the other side are going, well, we're willing to put Call of Duty. If Call of Duty is the focus point, we're happy to put that on PlayStation. We've already signed all these pre-contract deals with other companies like Nintendo and GeForce Now and such. We just want to spend money to invest to grow our business. And I think as a US-American company want to do that, a US-American judge is going to look at that and go, like, who's going to lose out? Game Pass is the best value for consumers in gaming, hands down.
Yeah.
So, like, I just think, they've not put enough of a defense up that definitively should say why this money and deal can't go through. So, but we'll find out. We'll talk about it on next week's show when Richie is hopefully back. But I do want to just round out with a couple of quick points of games that are coming to Game Pass this month. Feel free, Rob, to let us know if you're excited for any of these. We've got quite a few in the pipeline. Starting off with Exo Primal, I think, which is interesting enough. It's one of those that it's coming from Capcom off the back of like Monster Hunter World and all the success with Resident Evil. This is the biggest title coming this year. It's dinosaurs, and you're hunting them with some kind of time travel stuff
in space.
Which I wasn't that interested. It looks a bit crazy, but then the things I'm hearing from like early previews and Summer Game Fest, all the journalists getting their hands on it, everyone seems to be quite excited by it. Like, I think it's like the Monster Hunter fan base are already hyped because of like it's following a lot of the same trends. And I don't know, where are you at on Exo Primal?
Yeah, I was excited when it first got announced. It was like right when we started doing this podcast, I think. And yeah, for Game Pass title, I'm all over it. I'll be playing it kind of the weekend it comes out, I imagine. Yeah,
we might actually do a stream here on the channel for it because it is multiplayer, so that's the thing. And I'm all for just going out and shooting loads of dinosaurs. Like, I think everyone thought this was Dino Crisis remastered or remake, like in the same vein of Resident Evil. And I do think we'll get there one day. I think when they're starting to bleed that Resident Evil stone dry of remakes, you look at their other franchises and you think, like, I think Dino Crisis is primed for that, like, kind of revival. And in the RE engine, could you imagine the T-Rex and the Raptors chasing you in that engine? Oh, it would be so horrifically scary. But I digress. So we've got Exoprimal coming imminently. Not too long to wait for that one. The date for it, I should actually say, is... Does it have a date? I can't see the date. Oh, can't see the date. Soon. We've got The Wandering Village coming. We have Arcade Paradise, Sword and Fairy, Tectonica, and Venba. Exoprimal July 14th, actually, I should clarify as well. And a bunch of the other ones scattered throughout. Go check those out. List is available on Xbox Wire, Pure Xbox. And then I think, Rob, that rounds out the show. There are some Games for Gold titles, but they just need to stop with Games for Gold.
Still exist, goddammit.
They need to stop with it to a point where even the link I've put in the doc isn't for Games with Gold, it's for stray articles. So even I couldn't get the right link for that. It was 2 games. It was Darkwood and something else, but basically Xbox. Just stop. Everyone loves Game Pass. Everyone has Game Pass. Like, ditch Games with Gold. Say goodbye to it. Put it to bed. Just like Rob, we will with this episode of XPass. That has been episode 36. Your weekly Xbox show where we round up all the Xbox and gaming news and FTC news. Hopefully we can stop talking about lawyers, courtrooms and court cases and just get back to video games and playing them here on the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell so you're kept in the loop with all the other great content we do, our live streams, our first looks and our other podcasts such as Luna Listening and Talking the PS. Rob will be back streaming again. Maybe with Richie, maybe not with Richie. We'll see later on this week. I do have that Amazon Luna look at Arkham Knight. That will be going up. That's already in the bag. It's premiering, ready to go live on Thursday, 8 p.m. British summertime. But other than that, have a great week, folks. Thank you very much for watching. My name's been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
We've been talking Xbox for Helix Plays Games. Have a great week, everyone, and play whatever makes you the happiest. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.